Hello everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee, or in my case wine. This is a podcast based on writers sitting around drinking coffee, or in my case wine, and talking about anything and everything. We may use explicit language, and will almost certainly drop F-bombs, but this is not the point or drive of the content, so consider us PG-13 with wine. There will be rants and raves and occasional readings. There will be conflicting creative advice driven by at least 3 utterly disparate points of view. Your hosts through this adventure are Jeannie Warner, John Schmidt, and myself, Chaz Brenchley. This is episode 7, Our Favourite Characters.
I love this. I've been thinking about this for some time. As characters drive story. I mean, something happens to somebody, the hero's journey or the setting, Harry Potter comes of age, the villain's descent. Characters drive story.
Absolutely.
Dialogue advances plot.
Well,
but
is that a truism? Am I supposed to know that?
I think it is. I've told it over and over again.
I have said many times that a plot is just what people do, which is why characters drive story, because
But dialogue advances from one part. Now, I've read a few books that they can't all start with saying Rookbat is a star in the G-star in the Sagittarian sector, in which, as we open up every Pern novel in the world, you get this little exposition, becomes your old buddy. You say, oh yeah, good old Rookbat, never forget Rookbat. But in general, I've read a lot of stories that are just somebody narrating what's happening, but it's all telling me what's going, and I do this and I do that. And those are the ones that I don't finish sometimes, or I don't go back to. It really is, how does my character act with other characters? So,
but you also bring out a point, show don't tell, and finally a point that I believe Kit made to me, which was very simply, good Lord, cut those first 17 lines off. They're not doing anything interesting. Only she said it better than that.
Yeah, there is a lovely tradition in publishing where you get the first somebody's first novel, and you really want to publish it, and the first thing you do is throw away the first chapter. Jeff Wyman says that writers like to clear their throats.
Oh, I like that.
It's nice, isn't it? I myself am hugely guilty of this. I have one short story which begins 3 times.
Okay.
And you could totally lose 2 of them. You could probably lose all 3 of them. And you would dive more directly into the actual story. But I like beginnings. I like openings. I'm in favour of setting a scene.
Sorry, I was just flashing back to a Sandler and Young album years ago. What shall we do for an opening number that hasn't been done before?
Yep.
Why even sing an opening number? They usually are such a bore.
So, ignoring the kerfluffle of throwing out the first 10 pages of my next novel, or my first novel, or the novel thing that I would write that isn't poetry, my favorite characters are sitting in here in front of me drinking coffee and wine. In a book...
You can't paint that, Rusty. This is beautiful. He's blinking. He's gesturing.
Yep.
He's gone. We broke him.
We
broke him. Who have been your favorite main characters, and what did you like about them?
Okay, I will grab one from my current reading. Because I grew up with Lord Peter Wimsey.
Lord Peter Wimsey is a beautiful main character.
He is a lovely thing. But the loveliest thing about him is that he's, in the early books, he's pretty much a cipher. He is not rendered human until he meets Harriet Vane. At which point he suddenly becomes a real person who is actually affected by things.
I found that in a bunch of the film noir ones. Sam Spade
Right.
and those of the hard-bitten detective
Yes.
novel. Hard-bitten or hard-boiled? I guess it's hard-boiled.
It's
detective
hard-boiled
novel.
technically.
Sorry.
No,
Okay.
that's okay. But
The
hard-bitten works
hard-bitten
too.
detective novels that are, and here was the thing: is you're kind of expected with some of that old style of writing
Yeah.
to not connect with them as a human being
Right.
on an emotional level, but
Yeah.
just an intellectual.
Yes, no,
level.
totally. I mean, this was the thing. I mean, we're talking obviously about mystery stories and
Yeah.
and crime stories generally at the moment. But no, it was the classic thing. It was a crossword puzzle. And that's the Agatha Christie approach. And indeed the classic approach of many writers in the genre. But that's the thing that I think Dorothy Sayers got bored. And decided to invest her characters with some actual humanity, which is why those books are still. I mean, I do not know. I know the first time I read Gaudy Night, which is the prime example of a Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane novel, and I mean it's special to me because it's all set in Oxford, which is where I grew up. And the first time I read it was on the train from Oxford to St Andrews, where I was going to college. And I love that book with a passion, and I do not know how many times I've reread it since then, but I can still reread it. The mystery element is irrelevant at this stage. I know what happens, and it doesn't matter. It's I'm there for the characters. And indeed the setting. Yeah, it's one of those books where Oxford is absolutely a character in its own right.
It's similar to the London of my beloved Sherlock.
Right. Yes, totally.
Or similar to any of those lands in The Hobbit, the love letter to the English countryside, which we recognize as the English countryside, because of the characteristics. I find you're discussing the revelation of the character of a character. Sorry for the complex word there. A bit grandiloquent, if I can mispronounce that word. Is in part, many of my favorite stories are about revealing the character through their actions and their interactions. The one I just read this last week would be Victoria Goddard's any of her series with Greenwing and Dart. And you find out that their college students returned, and through the series of books, their character is revealed. And that is fascinating to me. And I come to view them as friends because their character is revealed through the story.
Yeah, I mean, character revealing a story, but in the end, you care about them less than it's like, I've had books where I've thought, what a great magic concept. And I love the way they're doing this, but I hate all the characters, so I don't finish. And this has been like that because everybody gets a great idea of, I've got this great plot hook that I'm going to throw out there, but they don't really have a real three-dimensional character.
Yeah, that's a different thing from I hate everybody in this book. They can be real and three-dimensional and still deeply dislikable. I had a long discussion with my friend Sean O'Brien, who used to be, well, no, he still is, but I'm going to work on from there. He is, I think, the foremost poet of his generation. He's an astonishingly adept poet.
Did he pay you?
No.
Awesome.
He used to buy me drinks.
That counts.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but we buy him drinks too, and we're not
Right.
the best poets
That's
of our
true.
generation. But wait, can you give me his biggest works?
That would be difficult.
Okay.
Because
We'll look it up and put it in the liner
we'll
notes.
put it up in the later note.
Okay.
But no, what I wanted to say was that Sean, is a very well-established poet. He became a short story writer mostly through my intervention because we ended up writing ghost stories for Christmas and then for Midsummer, and it became a thing which is still ongoing, though I am 7 years gone. I love that. It happens at the Lytton Phil in Newcastle every Christmas and every Midsummer. Ghost stories written by friends of mine.
Phil?
The Lytton Phil is the Literary and Philosophical Society of Newcastle upon Tyne, but it's actually a private library. It's my favourite place on the planet. It's I used to live there practically. It's a Georgian building with a Victorian interior, and it's exactly what library porn should be.
We'll be moving there shortly.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
There's a silence room in the basement, which was mine.
Silence room?
Yes.
Like the Diogenes Club?
Much.
Ah.
Yes. But anyway, no. I was in the pub. I was frequently in the pub with Sean, and on this particular occasion, I was in the pub with Sean, and he was writing his first novel, he was irritated by this whole notion that a character needed to be sympathetic.
I don't even say sympathetic, but I need to like something about it. Like Mark Pantoja from our writing group wrote horror stories.
Right.
And I remember pointing him and saying, and right here, this was the line where I fell in love with your little psychopath. And all of the really nice people in my writing group, which most of them are really, really nice people,
I know,
looked at me shocked. How could I possibly? I'm like, because he did this deeply squicky thing, but you can't be rude to a bartender. I said, and you lost me when you were rude to the bartender because you set him up as being, even though he is a vivisectionist taking apart his family with irons and poker. I don't even remember. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But it's you had it, and there was a tenderness, and there was a certain passion that made me appreciate, like how you fall in love with Hannibal Lecter a little bit. See,
right.
And again, John is a nice man who just made a horrible face saying Hannibal Lecter, but in the series Hannibal, he is entrancingly artistic, and something can be artistic and horrible all at the same time, which is in fact the theme of that whole TV series.
Yes, the TV series of Hannibal is one of the most extraordinarily beautiful things I have ever seen. Visually, it's gorgeous.
Did you notice the blood swirling in the same way that the coffee cream swirled?
No, totally.
It was like
this.
How many times did they have to swirl coffee until it creamed exactly the same way?
They're writers. They have a lot of experience at that. But the point you make is I can go, Hannibal, Mr. Lecter. And yet he completely fascinates me.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a horrible person.
Certainly.
He's a horrible character.
But you can
he's
still
so well
love
done.
him.
Yeah,
and
no,
love
absolutely.
him,
And
he drives the stories.
He does. He completely drives the story. And my argument is that as the writer, you have to be a little bit in love with your villains.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Lindsay, isn't he the one who wrote Dexter? I think it might be a pseudonym. Sorry, Jeff, if that's not your real name. But the Dexter novels. What a horrific creature that does horrific things to people, and yet I love it. And to a certain extent, that's why I went out looking to the agents that represent that sort of thing. My challenge is that there are things we accept in a boy that are harder to accept in a girl, which is why it's hard to find representational equality in that way for the female hard-boiled detective novels. You don't really see, do you?
Have you read Kate Brannigan novels by Val McDermid?
Yes, and I like Val's work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Val's work very much. I read it, but it's still not quite the. The old Sam Spade was a male chauvinist pig.
Yes, but he was encompassed by a society that was male chauvinist.
Well, exactly.
And I don't know if you could go back and write a female hardboiled detective in that setting and make it work.
But can you do it now
Can
and
you
have
do it
it
now?
show
Surely
up?
you can do it now.
Well, is it what people expect, though, is an interesting...
Well, that's even
audience.
better.
Well, and there was a fun thing, is I recall distinctly the first time I ever read female heroine sweeping sci-fi was Joe Clayton's Skeen books.
Right.
Which... the tragedy of Joe Clayton, like dying far too young and too early, is one thing, because I was deprived of more Skeen. But Skeen's Leap, Skeen's Return, Skeen's Search. Skeen was the first of my interstellar pirate smuggler active salvage routine. Mm-hmm. And many of my more adventurous, more pushy female sci-fi protagonists in my head come out of Skeen. Sure. And I wanted to grow up and be Skeen somehow. And I had never run into that because, and this is, again, it can drift too much into the topic of representation. But then you have Kate Elliott's Duran series that also was a female protagonist, and Elizabeth Moon's Paxenarian, which put a female protagonist into a very traditionally male role of the hero, the hero's quest, as it were, and what is becoming a hero in something that is more than a 3-minute montage.
And also in a military setting.
In a military setting. It's hard. And so
she did it really well and broke the old rules.
Yeah.
Isn't it beautiful?
And Jack Harkness was one of the first. Captain Jack in Doctor Who kind of paved the way for why do you have to have a binary character either? I mean, neither gay nor straight, but why must you define me? I am my own man. I love that character. And I'm loving the modern hero, heroine, whatever they happen to be, because there's representation. People can see themselves now. And I was never going to be a hard-bitten 1940s guy. And I didn't like how they treated women particularly. So some of them I didn't enjoy reading as much.
Sure.
But the main character still moves it along.
And rolling back, you've given excellent examples of character. All of these people you've named are strong characters. I don't have much resonance with any of the Doctor Who characters, but I know who that is.
Yeah, like Torchwood was an interesting taking Jack Harkness and moving it forward and giving a woman who was the police officer, and I'm sorry I've forgotten the name, but I'm sure 1,000 of you already know it. So, but she became kind of one of the main characters. The internet can do it.
Yeah.
But so that makes it an interesting thing of, did Jack then become a favorite sidekick? Or is he still a hero? Or is it a two-person? Who are your favorite sidekicks? Like, Nancy Drew was some of my earliest book reads when I was a kid, and I loved Bess.
This means nothing to me. I have not read Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew is a series. She was the first young female investigator. It was the same time as Hardy Boys and Johnny Quest and the adventure novels for young adults. I think was some of the first YA before there was YA. Okay. Her best friend was named Bess.
Okay.
Definite YA, and it goes back earlier, but whereas the British got The Wind in the Willows and other fantasy.
We did. Mole is like a permanent sidekick, actually.
Yeah.
However the story develops, there's always somebody else who's leading, and Mole just trudges along.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Eeyore is like, one could make an argument for Eeyore being the best sidekick ever.
Piglet.
I mean, I don't know. Eeyore has always been fond of, because he may have been depressed, but his friends still asked him out on adventures,
And he still went.
It'll end in tears. I'll hold the stick. We're all going to die, I'll hold on to the rope as long as I can. And that's a beautiful thing. That's...
And then, of course, there's the extension of Eeyore in Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker.
Marvin. Yes.
Do you want me to stick my head in a bucket of water? I've got one ready.
Yes.
Which is just the best line ever.
I assume you're going to want to do something terrible, but I'm going to help you achieve your goals. That's a beautiful sidekick, really.
It totally is.
It'll end in tears.
It always does.
Now, there's a question. Is the person who says to you in your life, it'll just end in tears, possibly blood, does that automatically make them a sidekick?
I think that is a sidekick's position. I think you are stepping into the sidekick role the moment you say that, because we know, by definition, you're going to join in. You're going to do it, whatever it is, although you don't believe in it. Yeah. And that's a sidekick position.
You've just given us an excellent definition that characters are non-binary. Are they the hero? Are they the sidekick? Yes. Are they the heroine in this novel? Yes.
Sidekicks, good ideas, though, but sometimes, it has to be executed. I would love to see an active. Can you think? Is there one I'm not thinking of? That's the
Sam.
Oh, Sam, you're right. Samwise Gamgee.
Oh, Sam. That's Sam.
Yes. Samwise Gamgee was actually the.
Although, of course, in the Lord of the Rings, the hero's role is always the one carrying the ring, and he was a ring bearer.
He was a ring bearer. Yeah. He absolutely was.
That's true.
And he was both a ring bearer and a Frodo bearer.
Yes.
Mhm.
which is
That's-
important.
That's a double burden,
Yes, it is.
too, because,
Yes.
the ring doesn't weigh as much as Frodo.
No,
I'm just saying.
except though it seems to as you approach the
Well,
cracks of doom.
Well, that's Frodo getting lighter as well, but
Yes.
we digress, of course.
Well, of course we digress, and of course we end
That's
up
what we
digressing
do.
into Tolkien
Well,
because
there's
hello.
sidekicks, though. I'm trying to think of, besides, you have Robin, you have Watson, you have...
Yes, Lord Peter Wimsey has Bunter.
Yeah, well, the person you explain, well, as you know, Bunter,
Yes.
clearly you can see. And does the
never
sidekick become
happens.
the audience? Is that why we love them? Is because they are that
Oh,
fourth
that's,
estate?
That's
Or-
that's a way to break the fourth wall. I
Yeah.
can't talk to you, the audience, so I talk to my sidekick. Yeah, that's it's. A
well, then
different-
that's
I
been
think
happening
that's a different
since
thing.
Sophocles, really.
Sophocles, yes,
Sophocles?
Jeeves.
Sophocles.
Okay.
Is Jeeves the sidekick or Wooster?
Oh. I kind of think that Bertie Wooster is his own little sidekick of, really, it's all about the story of Jeeves.
Well, yeah,
A butler's tale.
yes.
Mm,
I don't know.
no. Looking at Bertie's character, his character drags the stories along.
Well, it does. I mean, it's his ridiculousness that drives the plot,
But yeah,
and it's Jeeves's
phlegmatic.
phlegmatic, worldly
Wisdom,
competence.
competence.
Because
Stunningly competent.
Bertie is totally incompetent at everything he tries to do, and Jeeves is totally competent.
Yeah.
He just gets things right. So yeah, it's a balance. That I don't think either one sidekicks the other. To be honest,
And it's still always kind of told third person. Now I'm starting to think about when we change it from third person, narrative to first or second person. Do multiple points of view storytelling scenes actually work?
Yes, they do. They can.
Yeah.
There are many great books out there that have multiple points of view. Stephen King is a master.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Sorry, Steve, you wrote a couple I didn't like. But
Oh
let's
God,
move
he's
on.
written so many books. I no longer read him, but technically, he's really good at that shifting viewpoint, chapter to chapter.
Now, I like it. I can say chapter to chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Heinlein's Number of the Beast. It was the first time I've ever ran into four main characters.
Right.
There was no sidekick. They
Right.
were, well, unless you view the spaceship as being its own
So,
sidekick. But
Yeah.
four main characters,
Mhm.
each one of them it was the whole chapter from one point
Sure.
of view.
Yeah. There was a thing, which baby writers do, and sometimes professional writers do it too, of flitting from head to head within the context of the same chapter.
I'm right here.
Um,
No, I got in trouble for this, actually.
Good.
And it was...
um,
And the way they said it's like, you see this as a movie, don't you? I'm like,
Oh.
yes, I did. Of course, I
Uh-huh.
saw it
Okay,
unfolding
right.
right in front of my
Yeah.
head.
yeah, but head swapping is different. I mean, it makes me
Only works for
seasick.
TV, maybe.
There are times when even writers I love do it and make it work. And there are times when I find I have done it myself. But that's mostly when I'm pastiching. Like Dorothy L. Sayers, we will come back to. Some of the Peter Wimsey novels, suddenly you're in a chapter, you're in a character's head, more or less, and suddenly you're getting a different perspective, and she makes it work.
Did she do Gordianus the Finder, or was that a
No,
different one?
that's I can't remember, but
You know who I mean?
I do.
That was good.
Yes.
Well, I'll figure it out and I'll look it up
Yes.
for the liner notes. But
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, but also you have ensemble storybooks like Chaucer. There's a movie written about A Knight's Tale.
There is. I love it, actually.
I do
It's
too.
very bad, but I love it.
Well, it's what it is. It
is what it
makes
is.
it modern.
If you dropped out the golden years, I would have no complaints with it. I had great joy in it, right up to the Bowie, I'm afraid. And I love Bowie, but
Excuse me, you
Leave
cannot
my-
malign Bowie.
That's right.
Under
Get
any
off,
I'm not,
off the
I'm
couch.
not maligning Bowie, just
that particular
Drop
usage
and
of
give
that
us 5.
one little use.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're just saying. And so, yeah, but there's ensemble writing can work like Star Trek. Each episode seemed to feature a different character in primacy, although they each had their roles. And Firefly.
Joss Whedon in general, he would have a main character, but certainly everyone else got their say.
Yeah, I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, by definition, is about Buffy. Mm-hmm. But there were...
The Willow episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Giles.
Yes. Yes, everybody falls in love with Giles.
Any disagreement?
I'm thinking about Giles right now.
Exactly my point.
Sorry.
I was waiting for a voice to disagree, but no one did, so there you go.
Well, similar to the Angel follow-up. I mean, the minute they invented Lore, the character that could read your aura, but only when you're singing karaoke, yes. I was like, where did he come from? And I love him so hard. I'm like Adventures in Babysitting. No one gets out of here without singing the blues. Da-na-na-na-na.
Yeah.
So
we've broken John again.
Again, he's a fragile creature. Now, the best thing I got out of the Mystery Writer's Handbook was to always know what your villain is doing. To have because your villain has a plot and a timeline, and even if it's just, this is when the evil bad train will arrive, this is when the stars will align, this is when the clock strikes 12 on the 12th day of the 12th month of the 12th year.
Yeah, okay. It's an interesting take on going into a book with a strategy. I quite like it as a strategy. I had not heard it until very recently, and it's not a thing that I have certainly applied consciously. But I was about to say something terribly interesting about villains at that point.
We'll remember in a minute.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking of, like, the Moriarty was the first of the creating the glorious villain, the perfect nemesis, the perfect adversary, the perfect... And to, how do you fall a little bit, like... I never had much use for Sauron, Morgoth, Melk, or
others, but Sauron is not a character.
But the Witch King of Angband is freaking awesome. Could we have more stories about how did this mortal man, because he was one of the Night of Mortal Men doomed to die.
Yes. And
how did he go from being, I am simply a good lord of my people, to the Witch fucking King of Angband, man? That's badass.
That is precisely the point I wanted to make, which is that no villain actually thinks of himself as villain.
I find that on Twitter constantly.
Right.
Too soon?
No, I'm just saying that, villains on Twitter. There are no villains on Twitter. Ooh, bad statement. There's a truth to that, but now we get in the definition of villain. Villain is one who wants to do evil to thwart the hero, thus making them, in many ways, the most interesting character there.
Certainly.
Because the villain is the one character in almost any book that cannot be a Mary Sue or a male version of a Mary Sue. What's the male version of a Mary Sue?
The male version of a Mary Sue is a Marty Stew.
Marty Stew.
That's
just wrong. And yet, I recently read Tarkin, a book about how a lovely man entered the inter-service at a time when the the Republic was becoming increasingly corrupt. I mean, think of where Roman Empire became Roman Republic became Roman Empire.
Okay, who wrote this?
I don't remember, but I'll put it in the line of notes.
It'll be in the line.
But basically, it's the story of how he gets raised to be one of the Moffs, and then the Grand Moff, and how he's introduced to Vader, who's another up and coming, in service of the Emperor, and the Emperor just wants to get rid of corruption, to get rid of corrupt local, star system mismanagement, to put down the Hutts that are getting too much power and spreading their criminal enterprises everywhere, because this has been allowed to flourish in a republic. So if they just and it created it turned something unsympathetic into being sympathetic.
Okay.
But I liked Peter Cushing so much that I read it, and
everybody likes Peter Cushing.
What's not
Peter
to like?
Peter Cushing was an extraordinarily nice man.
Was he?
Apart from anything else, he really was.
I wish that I'd met him or slept with him or something. But he was also one of my favorite early Sherlock Holmeses. I saw one of those, and but taking that, and I have enjoyed those where you find somebody that is the quote unquote bad guy here, that it's like, maybe he wasn't always bad. Maybe he started out with what are very noble, and just simply he came from a family that's big on the hunt and stopping the chaos and saving the family and preserving.
Maybe he's not really bad. Maybe we've just picked the wrong hero to follow.
Yeah. Instead of them all being rebel scum, maybe they're rebel scum because they are overthrowing the idea that no, you need some governance, because when you think about it, a whole galaxy full of Han Solos doesn't really work, does it? Because how do you collect taxes? And taxes buy you civilization. And that alone can cause a Twitter storm. So, but villains, what are your favorite villains there? Now, Tarkin is one of mine, and I always kind of I wrote a short story about Jafar, Al Bernacki, the original model for Jafar from Aladdin. What if he was just a guy trying to hold his kingdom together in a really rough time?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of trouble in the Middle East throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was once invited to contribute a story to an anthology about villains.
Who did you pick?
I created my own villain.
Awesome.
I don't do that sort of fanfic thing, except obviously in the Creator School and Peter Wimsey on Mars and all these other things that I'm doing now.
Except when you're not. So we'll just go there.
Absolutely.
Okay, right.
So yeah, no, I totally did my own. I think everybody did their own villains actually. But I rather wittily called the story Villanelle.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you. And I did write the poem first,
mm-hmm.
And then wrote the story, and did not include the poem in the story, but it was kind of there in the background. I liked that. That was fun. But he was a totally evil character, and he knew it. But it's I mean that's the point I was trying to make, is that generally villains are not thinking of themselves as evil. They are. I mean they may indeed know they're the bad guys, like the great train robbers knew that.
Well, they did that in Red. Of the biggest thing was when Richard Dreyfuss's character said, "You don't torture people. I torture people. Yeah. I'm the bad guy here."
Yes.
Which was the big. Oh,
but
I see.
Was joking. I'm going to go for my favorite sidekick villain ever.
Yeah.
Your choice of Iago.
Ah.
Iago the parrot, or Iago?
Probably not.
Iago is
not.
the actual bad guy, though, in Hamlet. Not Hamlet,
Yeah,
Othello.
Othello.
Sorry.
Othello, yes. Yeah, and he's the sidekick of Othello. And in Hamlet, well, Hamlet has a whole range of bad guys. But it's
was
the
it
uncle
Claudius?
who's driving
Claudius,
it.
yes.
Yeah, but villain sidekicks.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, simple college students who undertake a commission to have their best friend killed on a voyage.
Certainly.
Well, when you put it
I mean,
like
who
that.
wouldn't when you're in college?
I can think of a couple college friends that maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we need more wine.
possibly. But yeah, these are all things that advanced it because I cared passionately about it one way or the other. And that's what I'm trying to say is, in the end, all of these entirely compelling characters, you can put that, maybe that's what fan fiction is I can take Tarkin and dump him in My Little Pony. And he's still interesting.
No,
I would still watch the My Little Pony with Tarkin episode.
The interestingness of bad guys is entirely the point.
Yeah.
It is famously the case that the baddie is much more interesting to write than the goodie. I mean, if you look back all the way to Paradise Lost, there's only one interesting character in Paradise Lost, and that's Satan. And that you can follow through the entire history of English literature, he said broadly. To my own work, I'm much more interested in my villains than I am in my... And the thing is, I mean, actually, as often as not, your good guys, if you're writing the kind of fiction that I write, the good guys are the victims. So they're non-contributory, really. They are there to suffer.
There's an interesting parallel with many people that I have found online that are both the heroes of their own story and yet somehow the greatest victim ever.
Yeah.
I could have been a contender. The man kept me down, so I think you have something there. Anyway, I will try to get all of links to all of the interesting things we have mentioned in this on the website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can also find us on Facebook. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre McGaffey-Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Ingberg. You can hear more from Michael Ingberg on Spotify or at manyhatsmusic.com. Today's sponsor was Way Too Much Stinky Cheese.